Hey guys, it's Will from Tested. I am here at the USS Intrepid. It is an awesome aviation museum in Manhattan in New York. I'm here with Eric Bain, who's the curator of the museum.
Of aviation.
Of aviation in the museum, of course. We're standing in front of one of the World War II aircraft in the collection.
Right, this is our Tbm Avenger.
Okay.
Designed by Grumman. This one's built by Eastern Aircraft, General Motors.
Tbm Torpedo Bomber M?
General Motors, Eastern Aircraft Division.
Very good.
It was a TBF when built by Grumman.
So how did this plane work? Was this the kind of torpedo bomber that kind of flew low over the waves and dropped a torpedo in, or did it do
It could, and we actually show a torpedo right underneath the belly there. Yeah, she can get low down on the wave tops and drop that torpedo in, and she can also be used as a dive bomber.
Now, explain the dive bombing, because the dive bombing seems terrifying.
It does, and my dad was an Avenger ball turret gunner, so I did get some stories from him. And it is terrifying. You're coming down at a very steep angle, nearly vertical, on your target, releasing that bomb and then pulling out before you hit it.
Hopefully before it was too late.
Right, and he always talked about, on the pullout, always having that narrowing of vision and nearly blacking out every time, depending on the G-forces they were
This is before they had compression G
well
suits and the whole thing. So we're going to take a look at the rest of the Intrepid's collection, or at least as much of it as we can show. Let's go see some more planes, Eric.
Yes.
Thanks. So Eric, you do your restoration and preservation work here on site on the carrier, right?
Absolutely, we have to, and it's kind of a temporary structure again, but we love working in our tent. This is where all the work gets done. We've painted something like 14 airplanes.
Wow.
In this spot here. So yeah, we got one in progress right now, our F3h Demon.
Okay.
The Demon's from the 50s, 60s era. They actually flew from Intrepid at one point in time. This airplane's been on display here for probably 20 years. It's been sitting out here in the New York environment. We've been trying to keep up with it, but we just had to drag it in here and really get the preservation work done. So we have to replace some metal. And
every once in a while, you have to kind of give it a tune-up, even when you're maintaining every day out on the deck.
Absolutely. So every airplane, we have job security here. Every airplane will rotate through here multiple times.
Well, can we take a look at your shop?
Yeah, it's really not a shop. This is just kind of our mess, we call it.
Well,
this is where the magic happens. Our aircraft restoration specialist is Peter over there working. He's working on the trailing edges of the stabilizers. These completely rotted out. They just kind of collect water. You can notice it's got that, one of the first uses of honeycomb structure.
Yeah.
The problem with it is a little water infiltration gets in there, and now you have corrosion problems.
And it freezes and compresses.
Yes, and then it delaminates, and it just makes a real mess. And so we're just trying to replace that metal and preserve this airplane for future generations. But overall, she's in pretty solid shape. The other thing Peter had to do was completely rebuild the nose cone. The nose cone is fiberglass radome. There's a air-to-air radar in there.
So it's fiberglass so that the radio waves can penetrate, right?
Absolutely. Looked like the nose was pretty solid. When we really got into it, the nose was falling apart.
Oh, wow.
So we actually you just can't go and buy a radome for a Demon anymore. So we had to build one. And so Peter had to make one from scratch.
Wow.
It's a little challenging here in our little tent on the flight deck, as we like to call it. But we have great volunteers that come out, and a lot of them bring talents and skills and craftsmanship and just a willingness to save these artifacts.
Well, and some of them probably worked on the planes in a previous life, right?
Believe it or not, we get a lot of young people.
Okay.
And that's even better.
That's awesome.
The old timers come out. That's great too, because they bring that knowledge and they bring a lot of stories, the background stories. It's kind of cool to know some of the human stories that went behind this airplane, not just this piece of metal we're fixing.
Well, that's the best part of the old airplanes.
It is. Here at Intrepid, we call it humanity behind the hardware. So you get those people stories. So we do a lot of people stories here when we do our interpretation.
Thanks for showing us a little bit behind the scenes. Let's go check out the rest of Intrepid.
Please.
So Eric, you were telling me that on Intrepid there are aircraft from each era that the Intrepids are represented here.
Absolutely.
What are we standing behind here?
Hey, this is an F3h Crusader from the Vietnam era. It's not the actual aircraft, but it's painted in the markings of Tony Nargi. Tony flew from Intrepid with VF-111 in 1968 and shot down a MiG-21. So we we had this F3h Crusader on deck here, which individually as its airframe did not have a very exciting history. It had its own history, but not a great story to tell. So we had this really cool Intrepid story to tell about Anthony Nargi flying from Intrepid in '68. So took a little license. We did keep the original bureau number assigned to this airplane on it. So it's just kind of masquerading as Tony's airplane.
The interesting thing about the F8 is it was from the time before missiles, right?
It was the time before missiles when she first hit that paper, but the drawing board, but she was designed to carry missiles, and she did. And the Navy actually made the decision to not put guns on the Phantom. So the F8 guys kind of bragged about being last of the gunfighters, is one of the words they used. And you know, the Vietnam experience kind of proved that once they got into air-to-air combat, once you got too close for missiles, you had to have something to shoot. Guns were still needed, so later on, F4 Phantoms were retrofitted with guns. And even today, the stealth fighters like the F-22, the F-35 will carry an air-to-air gun for that close-in stuff.
Eric, it's a Blue Angel. This is not the Blue Angels that they're flying today.
No.
But you told me there's a story here. There's a story with all of these
Every
planes.
airplane here has a story, and I'm intimate with every one of them. But this one here is kind of personal. This is an F-11F Tiger.
Okay.
The Blue Angels flew these for about 12 years, from the late 50s to the late 60s even. They flew them for quite a while in their shows. It had a very short career in the Navy as a carrier-borne fighter because it was eclipsed technology-wise. But it was a really great airplane for doing formation flying and doing that PR work that the Blue Angels are known for. And so when I arrived here, got the job 7 years ago, this airplane was sitting on a deck, and I had trouble finding history on this airplane. With the help of some friends and some people at the Blue Angels, kind of a little reunion association, I was able to determine that this was Blue Angel number 5 from 1961 through 63.
Oh, fantastic.
With the same pilot, this guy right here.
Oh, really?
So I just had to. The airplane did not serve in any fleet squadron. It served as Blue Angel number 5 for 3 years, for most of its life, with one guy. So it was a no-brainer to just repaint her back in the Blue Angel colors that she wore back in those days. And so while I was doing that process, I was also working on some slides at home that I inherited from my dad. My dad had passed away, and I had all these slides. And in there, it was slides from the Willow Grove Air Show from 1963. I'm like 4 years old at the time. And there, in the slides, are the Blue Angels. So in 1963, I saw this airplane fly while sitting on top of my dad's shoulders with this guy in the cockpit. And so I had this kind of
It all comes
moment.
back around Inception.
It was like this giant circle of life for me and this airplane. So I went looking for this guy, and still around, retired Admiral Lou Chatham, living out in Arizona somewhere. I went through the Reunion Association, and I said, give him my number, and he called me at home that night. This is Admiral Lou Chatham, heard you got my airplane, you know? And I was so happy to talk to this guy. He was just the greatest guy in the world. I actually flew him up here last year to come talk to our visitors and to stand here in front of this airplane and talk about his career in the Navy, which spanned, it spanned decades after his time as a young lieutenant flying with the Blue Angels. He was a fascinating guy.
So this is one of my favorite planes of all time that we're standing in front of here. It
Really?
never flew off the Intrepid.
No, not at all.
A little bit
Too
big.
Yep.
But this is an A12.
This is the Air Force/CIA A12. And this kind of preceded the SR-71, which a lot of people know as the Blackbird.
Right. So the SR-71 is the famous cousin, but this was the plane that paved the way. And there's some small differences between this and the SR-71.
Sure.
But it's pretty minor, right?
Well, mostly internal. Externally, they kind of resemble each other. There's some little details we can go over, but we'll avoid that for time.
Okay.
But one of the more outstanding things is this is a single-seater. And I think the SR-71s just had so many advanced sensors, it's just task saturation for one guy to handle. You needed that second operator in there. It's a great A-12 story, and I call this the time the A-12 prevented a war. If you remember the Pueblo incident, 1968, we got this little spy ship sailing around in what we considered international waters off of North Korea. The North Koreans considered it their territory. And once again, they're doing a little saber rattling like they're known to do even today.
It happens, yeah.
They sent some gunboats out, and they actually captured our ship, the USS Pueblo, and brought it into their waters, into port. And they held the crew for quite a while. And here's where the A-12 comes in. 1968, the history books tell you what was going on in Vietnam. We are up to here in Vietnam, and we don't need a second front. We don't need problems with Korea.
Right.
Are they saber rattling? Are they really meaning it this time? Are they going to mass troops? Are we going to have a problem at the DMZ in Korea now? A-12 comes in, and they overfly North Korea. Not only do they find the Pueblo, they find a building that may house the crew. At least this is a building big enough if we do need to go in there and rescue them.
Okay.
But more importantly, they find that the North Koreans are not massing troops. They're not mobilizing for any trouble with South Korea. So now we can let diplomacy do its thing, and we can get the crew out of there eventually without having to worry about military action on the Korean Peninsula. So there's a war, I think, prevented, and we really would have stretched this thin, especially since
it was an unpopular war already.
Yeah, we're already in up to our necks in Vietnam. Why do it again? And of course, they kept the ship. It's still, I think they use it as a museum, American Atrocities Museum, I believe, still in North Korea. So we didn't get our ship back, but we got our people back.
But the plane is still, it holds all sorts of speed records to this day.
Yeah.
3.5 times the speed of sound or more.
Sure.
Coast to coast in under 30 minutes. Isn't that what the
kind of
record
crazy
was?
number? But what I find really cool here at Intrepid was we have a representative of the fastest military airplane. We also have a Concorde, the fastest civilian airplane. add a space shuttle to that, and this is just a really cool place to come.
Let's go down and check out the Concorde. Eric, we're in front of another star of the Intrepid's collection.
Yeah.
This is something I was always jealous. I never got to fly on. I only saw him flying once or twice. This is a Concorde.
Right, probably the most beautiful airplane we have here.
It's a absolutely gorgeous piece of machinery. It's the only supersonic airliner that's ever been built, right?
Yeah, will it ever fly again? Will they ever have a supersonic airliner again?
I like to think maybe, but
so in my lifetime.
How did this end up in your all's collection?
Well, they became available. And it's before my time, before I came here, but my predecessors figured it would be a great attraction to have here, and it really is. So now what we do is just special tours that are fully guided and limited in number. So if anybody wants to see the inside of the Concorde, you got to kind of get here early and get on the list because it's very limited. The tour guides only take about 15 people in at a time. So it's hard to get that tour.
Eric, you say that every plane has a story. This is a ball turret from an A6. TBM. Your dad fought one of these in the war.
Yeah, he did. My dad was a ball turret gunner during the war, so I kind of grew up knowing about Avengers and knowing about the ball turret. So when I got here at this museum, we actually needed a ball turret for our airplane. Our airplane didn't have one because it had a life as a fire bomber fighting forest fires after the war. Of course, the turret was missing.
Right.
So we actually rebuilt it from parts we found all over the country in different places and put it back together. Yeah. This is the interrupter here for the gun.
Because the turret could actually shoot the wings and the tail.
Sure, you could shoot your own wings and your own tail off if you weren't careful. You're concentrating on that enemy guy, you're tracking him, you're not realizing your tail is coming into view. So you notice it's got a barrel here with cams, one for each wing and one for the horizontal and vertical stabilizer. So this would turn with the turret. As the turret turned, I have it disconnected now for demonstration purposes. And then this section here, when you raised and lowered the gun, this would move in conjunction with that, up and down, this block. Then there was a micro switch, and if you put your finger right on that button right there,
okay,
and you'll feel as I move the cam around, there you feel
it pushes out, yeah.
It pushes out, it activates a micro switch. So whenever the cam runs over that switch, you'll turn the gun off electrically and it won't fire.
Just, Eric, tell me a story about the plane that we're standing in front of.
This is our Skyhawk, our A4 Skyhawk. You know, the Louvre has the Mona Lisa. Every museum has its key piece. This is our Mona Lisa. This is our key piece here, and the reason is because this Skyhawk is the only airplane in our entire collection of 27 airplanes that really flew from Intrepid in combat. Now, there's several airplanes here that we had that type, but not that exact one. This exact airplane was on Intrepid, our first Vietnam cruise, 1966. When I discovered that, through my research, I discovered this. She was actually painted in the wrong markings when I was here. And I had to repaint her to represent Attack Squadron 95, VA 95, the Flying Lizards that were on the ship at that time with this airplane.
So how do you track the history of an aircraft? Is there a VIN number or something like that? Or is it?
It's like a VIN number on your car. You know, you can do a Carfax. I hope that's not plugging a...
No, you can plug whatever.
Plug a company there, but you can do a Carfax on your car. You can use the bureau number, the Air Force calls them serial numbers. You can use that to research the history of that airplane. And I found that this airplane's history put it on Intrepid in 1966 in Vietnam.
And I'm sure because they're the military, they have detailed records all the way back of everything that the plane's ever done, right?
You would think. But some of them are good and some of them are bad. Sometimes it gets a little sketchy as you go back in time. This one was pretty good. I knew we had VA 95. But what was really cool, once again, that humanity behind the hardware. Vietnam, 1966. I went to the cruise book. The cruise books that the Navy made, the crews made these whenever they went somewhere on a cruise. It's kind of like your yearbook from high school or college. So I opened it up to the page for VA 95, Tech Squadron 95, and here's all these pretty pictures of these young officers and the enlisted guys that helped maintain them. And so, doing the modern day thing, I Googled them. With the help of a volunteer, Vinny P. Costanza, he's out there somewhere, he's one of my great volunteers. He actually found 14 guys that flew this airplane off Intrepid by Googling them. So it was really fun to make these phone calls. Hey, you Joe Schmo who flew off Intrepid, yeah, who are you? We found the guys.
We have your plane.
We have your plane. And,
that's awesome.
And some of the guys are like, I don't want to talk about Vietnam anymore. I'm done with that. They've moved on in life, and I respect that completely. But some of the guys are like, holy mackerel, I got to come visit my airplane. Because this thing, I flew over Hanoi in this thing, and it brought me home.
Oh, yeah.
So, and then the airplane had a really interesting history after that. She, in '67, she went on the USS Shangri-La, flew another 100 some odd missions over Vietnam. And in '68, she was on the JFK, once again, to Vietnam. So this little dude has been over Vietnam a lot of times, and she came home, and here she is.
What kind of plane, what does she do? What's the role?
The A4 Skyhawk was a ground attack airplane. They were not meant for air-to-air combat. They were meant strictly for bringing loads of bombs and weapons over the target.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Eric. Thank you so much for showing us a little bit of the Intrepid's collection today, Eric. This has been a lot of fun. And of course, if you guys want to know more about the Intrepid, you all have a website.
We sure do, intrepidmuseum.org.
It's right down there, just in case. And we'll be back with more from Tested real soon. I'm Will. See you guys later.